Hi everyone, welcome to tonight's Facebook Live. My name is Julianne Fay, and this is Stars with the Stars. I don't know why it's not showing this. Let me check if I'm live on my phone here. Hi everyone, welcome to tonight's. Okay, looks like I am live. I'm not sure why it's not showing the description. That's a little weird. But I had some issues connecting up. It's very, very windy where I'm at, so I have no doubt that that's contributing to some of the weird internet connectivity going on. So hopefully we don't have any issues while I'm going live. Looks like we are good though. So tonight, if you're new to my lives or if you're watching this on replay on my Facebook business page or on my YouTube, welcome, welcome. So what this series is a series of astrological chart walkthroughs that I do. If you look on my YouTube, you'll be able to see lots of other Stars with the Stars episodes that I've done. I've been working through various actors and cast members in I Dream of Jeannie, a really, really popular and amazing 1960s kind of vintage television show that I absolutely love. So far I've done Barbara Eden's chart, I've done Larry Hagman's chart, and I've done Bill Daly's chart, which are Jeannie, Major Nelson, and Captain Healy or Major Healy. He kind of, I think, shifts his rank at some point in the series. So I wanted to kind of round out I Dream of Jeannie with Dr. Bellows, who is played by Hayden Rorke in the show. So I was looking at his Wikipedia, just kind of finding out some interesting things about him I didn't know before. Oops, I don't want to show you guys the chart just yet. So let's actually go back. And I wanted to show you guys, kind of jog your memory. I know some of you may know who he is, some of you may really not, and that's perfectly okay. So he was an actor. He was actually born in, I believe it was 1910. Yes, 1910. So he's definitely older than Barbara Eden and Larry Hagman. And what was a good picture I was looking at? Oh, I was really enjoying looking at this picture before. This is Barbara Eden, Ringo Starr, and Hayden Rorke. And I went to the Tumblr. It said it was at Studio 54. So just like a really classic picture of, obviously Ringo Starr is one of the Beatles, was really important in the 1960s and still is. And Barbara Eden and Hayden Rorke were both in I Dream of Jeannie. So that was just a really fun picture, kind of really representative of that time. Oh, so here's a good picture. So, and by the way, if you're catching me live, please leave a comment so that I can know you're here. And I'm happy to answer any astrological questions, general astrological questions you have while you catch me live. So I love this photo. Obviously, this is a stock photo from the show, but we could see Barbara Eden as Jeannie. We could see Major Nelson, Bill Daly, and then here is Dr. Bellows, played by Hayden Rorke. So if you don't know about his role in the show, it's interesting. I had a strong feeling that he had a water moon because of his really prominent blue eyes, and I would have thought moon in Pisces. We'll see. He actually comes up as, I believe, the moon in Cancer. We'll double check where that Neptune is as well, but I think Neptune also plays prominently in his chart, and we'll talk about that. And like I said, if you're here watching, definitely leave a comment so that I can know that you're here. So tonight I'm going over Hayden Rorke, who is Dr. Bellows from I Dream of Jeannie. And if you don't know anything about his character in the show, he's a psychiatrist. So he's one of the primary medical doctors on the NASA base, and he's responsible for making sure that the astronauts are taking care of themselves mentally and physically. So sometimes in certain episodes, he is responsible for appointing someone to ensure their physical fitness, but most of the time he's really there around mental fitness. And if you can imagine being an astronaut, there's a lot of mental pressures and stressors that can occur, right, when you're put into this completely alien environment like space. So it requires almost like a lot of monitoring of your mental capabilities, dealing with different challenges, and a lot of the times astronauts are put through different types of challenges that might simulate what it would be like to be in space. So, and especially during the time of the 1960s, this was a time in which there was a lot of, especially landing on the moon. Recently, where they were showing Major Nelson and Major Healy that they went in, that they did actually, I think, I don't know if they went on the moon or they orbited the moon, I think, with their spacecraft was the episode. And they said in the trivia that about 2 months later was actually when we actually did land on the moon. So I thought that that was really cool. But definitely in the culture of this show, astronauts would have been considered like almost like celebrities in a way, because there was a lot of attention on them. There was a lot of attention on going into space and all of these things. So it was definitely like a very hot topic, you know, of the time. And I talked about this more in previous episodes of Stars with the Stars, but a lot of the energy at that time was actually in the 1960s was a Uranus-Pluto conjunction in Virgo. So this was a lot of very focused, detailed energy around exploring different realities and different ways of approaching precision and healing, many, many different things. But it was Uranus and an earth-based sign, Virgo. And it's interesting because now, as I'm recording this for you guys, we have Uranus in Taurus, which is another earth-based sign. I think I'm going to be writing a blog post on some Uranus and Taurus things that I've been noticing, some quirky things. So definitely make sure that you're subscribed to my email newsletter. That's where you can be kept up to date with future videos that come out, blog posts, specials that I'm doing, all kinds of good stuff. And you can find a link to go to my website and you can sign up for my newsletter that way. So anyway, we have Hayden Rorke character. He is in the same, you know, career scene as the other characters, obviously excluding Jeannie. And, you know, basically the premise of his character is that he is responsible for like making sure that they are sane and that their mental health is sharp, right? So as you can imagine, Major Nelson having a Jeannie creates a lot of like unexplained phenomenon or phenomenon. It creates a lot of unexplained oddities and the things that happen, and he's oftentimes on the receiving end of witnessing these things and then trying to report to his supervisor that he's seen this thing that's going on, or that Major Nelson has this miraculous ability, or this miraculous thing appeared and it's so crazy and what the heck. And he'll go to like his reporting officer, and usually by then Jeannie and Major Nelson have figured out that it's about to, like, her kind of like secret is about to be leaked, and they find a way to almost like outsmart him, you know, and keep it under wraps still. And then typically, you know, he and his supervisor will come back and that thing that he said was happening is now gone. So there's a lot of what's called gaslighting within his character, which is that he's being constantly convinced that what he saw, which was real, actually didn't happen or didn't exist. And gaslighting is a psychological term that's often related to toxic relationships in which people are essentially doing like almost like emotional or mental manipulation, trying to get someone that's like observing things or trying to speak up about patterns or things that they notice to really say, oh, you're crazy, you don't know what you're talking about, this or that. So gaslighting in and of itself is not a good thing. But obviously this is a fictional show and we're just using that term to give a name for kind of what's happening. So I find it interesting, like almost like the paradox of that he is a psychiatrist, which is of the mind, but he's the one that's constantly like, oh, I'm the crazy one. And it's very interesting how it all kind of like ties together. And you know, I definitely feel like Uranus energy can be like that. It's kind of like a mind trip, you know, it like takes you out of it to take you back in it. So it's definitely like a very mentally stimulating thing, you know, kind of what's happening with his character. So, but obviously a very fun character. And I had looked on his on Wikipedia, and there were some quotes in there from Barbara Eden saying that he was just a really amicable man to work with, a very nurturing, calming man that always was a supportive, positive presence on the set. And I didn't know this, but he actually was gay, and I had no idea. I hadn't really looked into much details about him, so I thought that was really cool as well. So let's pull up his chart here. How am I doing on time? Okay. So we don't have a birth time for Hayden Rorke. I didn't expect that we would. I did really quickly a little bit of research to see if I could find any charts that were done with his birth time. I couldn't, but I was able to find when he was born and where. And it just said Brooklyn, New York. There's multiple counties in New York. Obviously, that's not going to make too much of a difference in like the actual latitude, longitude. The reason why we need a birth location in astrology is because that narrows down the specific part of the world that the person was born in, and like the latitude, longitude that affects the chart. It affects the position of various things, right? So two people that are born at the same time, but one that's born in New York City and one that's born in LA, they're going to be technically 3 hours apart, right? So there will actually be a difference in the placement of the planets in the sky because of the difference in the position that they are on the Earth in relation to the position of the planets and the stars above them. They are technically at different points. So that can shift things and that can create changes. And in fact, there's a really fun branch of astrology called astrocartography, which is when you actually take someone's chart and you map it. You plot the chart over the world, and you can actually look at what parts of your chart are illuminated or lit up when you are in different parts of the world. It's really fascinating and actually very accurate. It's almost scary, as an aside. So here we are with his chart, Hayden Rorke, and he was born on October 23rd, 1910 in Brooklyn, New York. So he was born on the very last day of Libra season. So he was a Libra Scorpio cusp. Interestingly, his sun is exact on my ascendant, and his Jupiter would be considered conjunct my ascendant. He actually has his Venus and Mars also conjunct my moon. So it's just so funny as I look at these charts with this show that I love so much. I just see so many synchronicities with their astrology and their energy and how that's like alluring and compatible and resonates with mine. It's just really interesting how that works, you know. So he's got a big pileup of energy in Libra, which definitely would contribute to what Barbara Eden was saying with him being very pleasing, very gentle, very loving. His moon is in a water sign. It's in Cancer. And we're going to ignore the ascendant and the descendant and the midheaven and the IC because we don't know the birth time. So we actually can't speak to those. Now, what's really interesting about his chart is it's a very clearly directed chart, right? So first of all, we have what's called a kite pattern. Do we have a kite pattern though? Does it form a point? Let's see. I think so. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit here. When these aspects get overlapping so much, it can be hard to see. Yeah, so he not only has a kite pattern, but he has almost like 3 kite patterns layered on top of each other. That's why it's a little confusing. So a kite pattern is when we have a grand trine, which is 3 of the same element, 3 of all of the signs of an element represented. So in this case, it's air. We have his Chiron in Aquarius. We have his Pluto in Gemini. And the reason why we have 3 kite patterns, one on top of the other, like superimposed, is because we have a big mashup of energy here. So we have definitely probably the Jupiter is the strongest one because that's it. Well, actually his Jupiter and his Sun are on equal footing because they're both within 2 degrees of these. So these are exact, right? 27, 27. This is at 29, so that's within 2 degrees. This is 25. It's also within 2 degrees. So we've got a grand trine here with his Chiron, his Pluto, his Jupiter. Another grand trine with his Chiron, his Pluto, his sun sign. And then, we could extend this further. It looks like it is plotting as well his Chiron, his Pluto, and his Venus and Mars. Now, Pluto is a very potent planet, a very powerful planet, but typically we give it a slightly narrower orb because of its size, as well as Chiron. So I would say that these planets at 20 degrees, personally, this is getting kind of farther out of orb, because this is now a 7-degree orb for smaller sized planetary bodies. But for sure, the Jupiter and the Sun are right in there, It's not to say that the Venus and Mars aren't part of the story. It's just that these guys are much closer in orb, so they're more potent, more powerful in the story. So, and if you're catching me live while I'm going over this, feel free to leave a comment so that I can know that you're here. And that would be great. So we have this kite pattern, right? So, oh, and I forgot the other part. So his Saturn in Taurus. Now, okay, so that might have been a small bit confusing. So we have the grand trine in air, and then the other parts of a kite pattern. So extending what I said about the grand trine, we have also this smaller triangle here, and then we have an opposition. So in this case, the opposition is his Saturn in early Taurus opposing his sun sign and his Jupiter in very late Libra. The reason why it's considered an opposition, even though Libra and Taurus do not oppose each other technically, Scorpio and Taurus oppose each other, is because these are so late into Libra that they're actually within orb of early Scorpio, which is what creates the opposition. So we have the opposition, which is considered the spine of the kite. Then we have two sextiles. So we have Pluto and Pluto sextiling Saturn. This is a harmonious aspect. We have Chiron sextiling Saturn, another harmonious aspect. And then we also have Chiron with Pluto, which is yet another trine. So this forms a kite, if you could see it there, right? So this is the kind of the back part of the kite, the front part of the kite, and then the spine of the kite. If you can imagine like a tail flowing out, that's what this would be. I have a kite pattern in my chart, and this is a slightly more rare placement to have. Some people have no patterns in their chart. Other people have multiple patterns. Other people have very common patterns. Other people have rare patterns. A kite pattern is considered to be a more rare pattern. And it can be challenging because the opposition creates this like strong thing that needs to be worked. And once you work that, it helps you to work all of the other energies. But when the opposition feels stressed or debilitated or isn't being worked properly, it really makes it difficult for the other energies in the kite to harmonize. The expression that they'll say is like, if you know how to work the spine of the kite, the opposition, then you'll be able to fly the kite. The rest of the energy will kind of take flight. But if you are having trouble with working that opposition, it will be difficult to get that kite kind of off the ground. And I'm just thinking how poetic this is that I have a kite pattern in my chart, and I'm recording this for you guys at a time in which I almost need to be reminded of my kite pattern and things like that, this analogy with that. So pretty cool. So he has this grand trine with these other elements, which forms a kite. He also has very, very strong squares from Uranus to his Venus and his Mars. His Venus and Mars are exactly conjunct each other in Libra. And this is within 1 degree, this square. So this is very tight. We also have Neptune here in Cancer, which is at 21 degrees. So this is also very tight, again, within 1 degree squaring his Venus and Mars. So I think it's safe to say that although he was a very loving person and enjoyed the partnerships in the relationships in his life, his relationships were also met with a lot of challenges, because having Uranus square Venus, Uranus square Mars, so let's take those one at a time. Technically, he also has Uranus square Jupiter, Uranus square Sun, and I don't know if it's actually counting, okay, it might even be also counting Uranus Mercury. Let's look at that. So Uranus And Mercury, we've also got Mercury here, yeah, square going on there, but in wider orbs. So he obviously had to incorporate a lot of Uranian energy, which can be, well, number one, Uranian energy was really prominent during the 1960s and relates to innovations, epiphanies, breakthroughs, but also spontaneity, unpredictability, and certainly his role as Dr. Bellows incorporates a lot of this energy, right? Of it's yet now you don't, you know, and especially in the relationships he had on the show, feeling like this stuff comes out of nowhere. That's like very Uranian. And also at the same time, there is an element to his character on the show where he's wanting to be supportive and nurturing and loving a lot of the time. And he's almost doing it in a way that's like too much. You know, he's doing it in excess, where it's like a lot of the times he's helping Major Nelson to do things that Major Nelson doesn't really want to do. And he's sort of saying like, oh, I really don't. And he's like, oh, nonsense. And then pushing for it anyway. That's almost like this Neptune in Cancer squaring these planets in Libra. You know, he's being a little bit delusional. Neptune creates delusions around the ways in which people want to be supported and nurtured. And then that sometimes, that's my dog Monty. I'm gonna take a sip of tea. That sometimes is creating tension with relationships, because this can create almost like a smothering aspect. It's like the delusional nurturer, the delusional motherer, you know. I think if this was a mother's chart or a woman's chart, it would be even more pronounced. But this could be also just in the way in his life in which he did nurture people. He could have at times been very sensitive, very psychic about the way that people needed nurturing. But he could have also taken on a lot of energy, maybe unnecessarily, with this. And he also, because he did get involved in maybe taking care of more things than he needed to, taking on more energy, caretaking energy than he needed to, this could at times put stress or tension in his life and his relationships, because it could have put him out of balance. Because a lot of energy, well, Libra itself is about being in balance. It's about being grounded, being able to hold both sides. And people with strong Libran energy, I have Libran energy myself, we really don't like being out of balance. You know, we feel like our life is just not good if things are really out of balance. So people with strong Libra energy, sun, moon, rising, and in his case, he has so much Libra energy, their whole life is about understanding how to create this like peaceful path and this equilibrium and like following a way of peace and also balance, you know. So these major planets squaring a lot of his personal planets here would definitely have put tension on his desire to live a more balanced, peaceful life. Interesting too, because I feel like when we were looking at Larry Hagman's chart and Barbara Eden's chart, we could really see how the astrology in their charts was perfectly matched to their characters. It's like it was meant to be, you know, that this fit that. And I could see it here with Hayden Rorke's chart, how this really does work out to be, you know, a very like Dr. Bellowsy chart, because we've got a grand trine in air, which is of the mind. Grand trines create flow and ease, and it's like you don't have to work hard to tap into that energy. It's just there. It's accessible. So Chiron being healing, you know, and at the end of Aquarius, this would be definitely healing through like non-traditional methods, you know, and especially of the mind. So this definitely could include things like hypnosis and regression and interesting psychological things, you know. And also kind of Pluto and Gemini goes along with that, penetrating deep into the subconscious mind, you know, which is very like, and then you have this overall though energy of Libra. And the reason that this is, you know, all harmonizing well is that in the penetrating of the subconscious mind and getting to maybe some non-traditional methods of healing, we're able to actually bring more peace to the individual, because we understand how to bring out almost like those dark elements, you know, and bring them into the light so that we can find a place of like peace, or like in biology we would say homeostasis, you know, like this kind of like positive, ideal state in which there's like less resistance, you know? So he's got this grand trine in Earth. We also have Neptune in his chart exactly opposing Uranus. So right now, as I record this for you, we are going through a Jupiter square Neptune transit. Whenever two major planets harshly aspect each other, it is noticed on a longer scale. We're talking many, many years, right? Well, it depends who's involved. So Jupiter moves more quickly than, for sure, Neptune and also Uranus. So I take that back a bit because it depends who's involved. But Uranus and Neptune are slower moving planets. So to be born at the time in which Uranus opposed Neptune means that he was born at a time in which the Earth, or the environment that he was in astrologically, was going through a major shift, because these are two major planets. So Uranus and Taurus would be like, or sorry, in this case, it's Uranus in Capricorn. I'm thinking of right now it's Uranus and Taurus, but this is Uranus in Capricorn and then Neptune in Cancer. And it's interesting because we have a lot of energy going on right now in Capricorn and Cancer astrologically. So, this would be like a not necessarily, so this is sort of like a dissolving of the traditional home life, but sometimes this is at odds with the desire to have the structure and the stability, but at the same time also needing to like upgrade, what was considered to be good business or good structures. So we want to think about, okay, what was happening in like 1910? Was that around the time of the Industrial Revolution, perhaps? I'm not a super history buff, as I do like 1920 going onwards. But, it'd be interesting to look at like, okay, what is the history that he was into? But this is a very interesting opposition for sure, Yeah, so it'd be interesting to kind of look more into that. So this is something that obviously is imprinted into his chart, but also as a generational aspect that he would have been under. So there would have been other people with this opposition, because this would be a slower moving opposition. But it's important to him because he's got so much energy going on, putting tension on his major planets here. So there's such a focus in the chart, putting tension on these major planets. But at the same time, he was very intellectual, very intelligent, very smart, could be quick-witted, which probably was a really important gift for being Dr. Bellows. He might have had to even improvise at times. And it's just interesting too how he's that grand trine. It's like very of the subconscious mind and like psychiatry. It could really see it, which was what his character did. So I find that all really, really interesting.